My parents didn't invite me to Thanksgiving. When I asked why, my mom said, "Your brother is bringing his girlfriend to meet the family. He doesn't want you there, because your blue-collar job would embarrass him." I just said quietly, "I understand." 5 days later, they showed up at my door, furious after finding out the truth. My brother's girlfriend was. The grease under Grayson's fingernails was a permanent resident, a stubborn reminder of a 10-hour shift spent in the damp, claustrophobic crawl spaces of Pittsburgh's aging suburbs. To the world, Grayson was just the guy you call when the toilet overflows. He was a silhouette in a faded navy jumpsuit, a man who smelled of copper pipes and industrial sealant. When he climbed into his 2005 Ford F-150, a rusted beast that groaned every time the ignition turned, nobody looked twice. And that was exactly how Grayson wanted it. As he drove through the affluent neighborhood of Shadyside, past the manicured lawns and the towering Victorian homes, he felt a familiar sting of irony. He had just finished fixing a leak in a house worth $3 million. The owner, a woman in a silk robe, hadn't even looked him in the eye when she handed him his check. She had pinched the corner of the paper as if his blue-collar grime were contagious. Grayson smirked, tossing the check onto his dashboard. Little did she know, the man fixing her pipes could have bought her entire block without blinking. 10 years ago, while his younger brother Carter was busy chasing prestige at an Ivy League law school, Grayson was working 3 jobs and living on canned beans. He didn't spend his money on nights out or designer watches. Instead, he poured every spare cent into aggressive index funds and undervalued real estate. While the world slept, Grayson studied market trends by the light of a desk lamp. He was a ghost in the financial system, a plumber by day, a predatory investor by night. Today, his net worth sat comfortably at $14.2 million. But his soul felt bankrupt every time he picked up the phone to talk to his parents. "Grayson? Are you coming to the Thanksgiving dinner next week?" His mother's voice crackled over the Bluetooth, sounding more like a chore than an invitation. "I'm planning on it, Mom. I even took the Friday off so I could help Dad with the—" "Actually," she interrupted, her tone sharpening. "That's why I'm calling. Carter is bringing his new girlfriend. Her name is Tracy. She's a high-level wealth manager for one of the biggest firms in the city. Very sophisticated. Very elite." Grayson gripped the steering wheel. And your father and I think it might be best if you sat this one out, honey. Carter is trying to make a big impression. He's up for a junior partnership, and Tracy's connections could change his life. We just don't want things to be awkward." "Awkward how, Mom?" Grayson's voice was a low growl. "You know how you are," she sighed. "The truck, the clothes, the talk about PVC pipes and sewage. It's not the vibe we're going for this year. We're hosting at the Country Club Banquet Hall. We just want everything to be perfect. Maybe we can do a small lunch with you the week after? Just us." The silence in the truck was deafening. Grayson pulled over to the curb, his heart hammering against his ribs. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the surgical precision with which his own mother had devalued his existence. To them, he wasn't a son, he was an embarrassment to be tucked away in a closet. "I understand," Grayson said, his voice eerily calm. "I wouldn't want to ruin the vibe." He hung up before she could offer a hollow apology. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He saw a man who had built an empire from nothing, yet was still a beggar for his family's affection. That night, Grayson didn't go to his modest apartment. He drove to a high-rise downtown, a building he secretly owned, and took the private elevator to the penthouse. He stripped off his stained jumpsuit and stepped into a rainfall shower. As the hot water washed away the literal grime of the day, a cold, hard resolve took its place. They wanted a perfect Thanksgiving? They wanted to impress a wealth manager? Grayson picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Tracy?" he said when the woman answered. "Grayson. I was wondering when I'd hear from my favorite client." Tracy's voice was warm, professional, yet carried a hint of genuine fondness. She was the only person in the world who knew exactly what Grayson was worth. She managed his $14 million portfolio. "I hear you're dating a lawyer named Carter," Grayson said, staring out at the city skyline. There was a pause on the other end. Oh, you know him? Tense. Very focused on his image. Wait, how do you know Carter? He's my brother, Grayson said. And my family just uninvited me to Thanksgiving because they're afraid a lowly plumber like me will ruin your impression of them. Tracy gasped. They did what? Grayson, that's horrible. Carter talks about his family like they're royalty, but he never mentions a brother. That's because to him, I don't exist, Grayson replied. But I think it's time we change that. Tracy, I have a proposal. And if you're as tired of Carter's arrogance as I suspect you are, you're going to love it. The Thanksgiving gala at the Oakwood Country Club was a masterclass in pretension. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Carter stood at the center of the ballroom, wearing a $3,000 suit that he had likely put on a credit card he couldn't afford to pay off. He swirled a glass of vintage scotch, holding court with his parents, who beamed at him as if he were a conquering hero. He's the youngest associate to ever handle the Miller account, his father bragged to a group of passing board members. And his girlfriend, Tracy, his mother chimed in, she manages billions. They're the city's next power couple. Carter smiled, but his eyes kept darting to the door. He was nervous. He needed Tracy to arrive. He needed her status to rub off on him so he could finally secure the partnership he'd been lying about being close to. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open. But it wasn't Tracy who walked in. A man entered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that fit him with surgical precision. The fabric had the unmistakable sheen of high-end Italian wool. His hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp, and his presence so commanding that the room's chatter dipped into a hush. It took Carter 10 full seconds to recognize the man. Grayson? Carter stammered, his glass nearly slipping from his hand. What the hell are you doing here? And where did you get those clothes? Did you rob a funeral home? Grayson didn't flinch. He walked toward the center of the circle, his footsteps echoing with an authority that didn't belong to a plumber. I thought about what Mom said, Grayson said, his voice projecting to the nearby tables. About not wanting to ruin the vibe. But then I realized, family should be together on Thanksgiving. Right, Mom? Dad? His mother turned pale, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was listening. Grayson, please. Not now. You're making a scene. We told you. You told me I was an embarrassment, Grayson finished for her. You told me that my type didn't belong in a place like this. Carter stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Because you don't, Gray. You fix toilets. Look at you, trying to play dress up. This suit probably cost more than your truck. You're pathetic. You're a loser who's going to spend the rest of his life covered in other people's filth while I run this city. At that moment, Tracy walked in. She was wearing an elegant emerald dress, looking every bit the high-powered executive. Carter's face lit up. Tracy, thank God you're here, Carter said, reaching for her hand. My loser brother decided to crash the party and embarrass us. Can you believe the nerve of this guy? He's a plumber, and he's standing here acting like he owns the place. Tracy didn't take Carter's hand. Instead, she walked right past him. She stopped in front of Grayson. I'm so sorry I'm late, she said softly, tucking her arm into Grayson's. Then she turned to the stunned crowd, her voice ringing with cold, professional clarity. Carter, I think there's been a massive misunderstanding, Tracy said. You keep calling this man a loser. But in my office, we call him something else. She looked at Grayson's parents, who were frozen like statues. We call him our most valued client. Grayson isn't just a plumber. He is the majority shareholder of the firm Carter works for. He owns the building we are standing in. And as of yesterday, his personal portfolio exceeded $14 million. The sound of Carter's scotch glass shattering on the marble floor was the only noise in the room. The silence that followed Tracy's announcement was thick enough to suffocate. Carter's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. He looked at Grayson, then at Tracy, then back to Grayson, his mouth working but no sound coming out. $4 million? Grayson's father whispered, his voice cracking. He looked at his eldest son as if seeing him for the first time, not as a disappointment, but as a mountain of gold. Grayson took a slow sip from a glass of water a waiter had just handed him. Actually, Dad, with the Northside acquisition closing this morning, it's closer to 16. But who's counting? Grayson, honey. His mother started, taking a tentative step forward, her face twisting into a grotesque mask of motherly affection. We had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? We've been so worried about your future. We only wanted you to work harder, to be like Carter so you'd be successful. Grayson laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh, it was a tired one. You didn't want me to be successful, Mom. You wanted me to be invisible. You loved the idea of a son who was a lawyer, but you hated the reality of a son who actually worked for a living. You didn't care about my future. You cared about your reputation at the club. Carter finally found his voice, though it was high-pitched and frantic. This is a joke. It's a prank, right? Tracy, you're playing a joke on me because I forgot our anniversary? There's no way he has that kind of money. He drives a truck with a cracked windshield. Tracy stepped forward, her eyes flashing with disdain. He drives that truck because he doesn't need to prove anything to people like you, Carter. While you were taking out high-interest loans to buy watches you couldn't afford, Grayson was buying the debt of the firm you work for. In fact, she paused, glancing at Grayson. Should I tell him? Grayson nodded. Carter, Tracy said, the junior partnership you've been bragging about? The board met this morning. They reviewed your billable hours and your, let's say, creative expense reports. They were going to fire you. But Grayson intervened. Carter's eyes widened with a glimmer of hope. You saved my job? Grayson stepped closer, his voice a low, dangerous ilk. No, Carter. I bought the firm. And then, as the new chairman, I personally signed your termination papers. You're not just not getting the partnership. You're unemployed. And since I also happen to own the management company for your luxury apartment, you have 48 hours to vacate before the locks are changed. You can't do that. Carter screamed, his bravado finally crumbling into terror. We're brothers. Dad, tell him. Their parents looked at Grayson, their eyes pleading. Grayson, please, his father begged. He's your brother. He's made mistakes, but he's family. You have all this money, surely you can help him? Help us? We're struggling with the mortgage on the house and we thought maybe, the house? Grayson interrupted. You mean the house you almost lost 3 years ago? The one where the anonymous donor paid off the arrears and lowered the principal. His parents blinked. That was you? It was, Grayson said. I did it because I loved you. I did it because I thought that even if you didn't respect me, I could still take care of you. But tonight, listening to you tell me I wasn't good enough to sit at your table? That changed things. Grayson reached into his pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. He tossed it onto the table amidst the half-eaten turkey and crystal glassware. Those are the transfer papers for the house, Grayson said. I'm not a monster. You can keep the roof over your heads. But from this moment on, the anonymous donor is dead. Don't call me for repairs. Don't call me for investments. And definitely don't call me for Thanksgiving. He turned to Tracy. Are you ready to go? I know a great diner that serves the best pumpkin pie in the city. No dress code required. Tracy smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. I've been ready for an hour. As they walked toward the exit, the room remained frozen. Carter was on his knees, staring at the termination notice. His parents were clutching the envelope, looking at the son they had thrown away, the son who had been their guardian angel in work boots, and who was now gone forever. The diner was quiet, the air smelling of toasted bread and cheap coffee. It was the perfect antidote to the suffocating opulence of the country club. Grayson and Tracy sat in a vinyl booth, their expensive clothes looking wildly out of place, yet they had never looked more at home. You okay? Tracy asked, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Grayson took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 10 years finally lifting off his shoulders. For the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm hiding. And I don't feel like I'm waiting for them to love me. They didn't deserve you, Gray, Tracy said firmly. They were so blinded by the sparkle of the world that they couldn't see the diamond right in front of them. What about you? Grayson asked. You lost a boyfriend tonight. And a lot of drama. Tracy laughed, a bright, clear sound. I didn't lose a boyfriend. I cut out a tumor. I've been looking for an excuse to leave Carter for months. He was obsessed with status, but he had no substance. You, on the other hand, she leaned in, you have more substance than anyone I've ever met. Plus, I've always had a thing for guys who know how to fix a leak. Over the next few months, the fallout of that Thanksgiving night rippled through their lives. Carter tried to sue, but Grayson's legal team, the best money could buy, crushed the suit before it even hit a courtroom. Carter ended up working at a car wash, finally learning the value of a day's labor, though his bitterness remained a heavy shroud. Grayson's parents sent dozens of letters, alternating between apologies and demands for money. Grayson didn't open them. He sent them back, unopened, until the letters finally stopped. He had given them a house. He owed them nothing more. Grayson didn't stop being a plumber, though he did stop taking emergency calls at 2 a.m. He started a non-profit trade school, teaching young men and women from broken homes how to master plumbing, electrical work, and carpentry, while also teaching them the financial literacy he had mastered. He wanted to build a generation of people who were invisible to the elite but invincible in their own right. 1 year later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Grayson and Tracy stood on the deck of a modest but beautiful cabin in the woods, a place Grayson had built with his own 2 hands. I have something for you, Grayson said, handing her a small box. Tracy opened it. Inside wasn't a giant diamond. It was a vintage brass key. It's to the new office, Grayson explained. The one where we're going to run our own private equity firm. One that only invests in blue-collar businesses. We're going to find the guys in the jumpsuits and the women in the hard hats, and we're going to make them kings. Tracy looked up at him, her eyes shimmering. And the plumber? What happens to him? Grayson pulled her close, smelling the pine trees and the promise of a future built on truth. The plumber is retired, he whispered. The man is just getting started. As the sun set over the Pennsylvania hills, Grayson realized that his millions had never been his greatest asset. His greatest asset was the calloused hands that knew how to build, the heart that knew how to endure, and the wisdom to know when to walk away from a table where love was no longer being served. He was no longer the invisible man. He was the architect of his own soul.